I want to ask you about President Xi Jinping and how significant are the changes he's made to the Constitution and what that means for China, what that means for democratic reform, what that means for human rights.
Well, I think, as we know, Xi Jinping really has centralized power to an unprecedented degree. He began very early on by assuming control of many of the committees and commissions that oversee Chinese policy on a range of areas, from the economy to foreign policy to national security issues. He has looked for provincial officials, for the media, for the generals to pledge their fealty, not simply to the Communist Party, but to Xi Jinping himself, which is quite unusual. Sense that there's been a cult of personality that has developed around Xi. He published a book of his speeches within the first 2 years. Again, a lot of this is quite unusual for a Chinese leader. Since Mao Zedong, we really haven't seen this kind of behavior. And now with the most recent Party Congress, with the 19th Party Congress, yes, he got his thought, Xi Jinping thought, enshrined in the Constitution, again, placing him basically on par with Mao Zedong. And he did not name a successor, didn't signal a successor, leaving open the possibility that in 2022 he will defy convention and seek to be the president for a third term. He can be the general secretary for a third term of the Communist Party, but not the president. So what does that mean for human rights and political reform? Well, if Xi Jinping were a different kind of leader, it could be good, because it could mean that he would push forward with political reform. But he's not. And everything that we see about Xi Jinping tends to suggest that he is more interested in regressing in terms of political reform. So deeper penetration by the Communist Party into civil society, into the economy, putting party committees into non-governmental NGOs, limiting very significantly the engagement of Chinese domestic NGOs with international NGOs through a new law on foreign NGOs. So I think the space, the political space, clamping down on the internet, right, which had become a very vibrant political space prior to Xi Jinping taking power. I think all of that suggests that he is not interested in debate, certainly not dissent, and that, from his perspective, what Xi Jinping says, goes.
What is your prediction for, you talk about the internet, and as much as perhaps the Great Firewall has been effective to a certain degree, there are still ways around that, and China is not as isolated as it was. Can he effectively, for a long time, really tamp down on all political dissent in China in the digital age? Is that possible? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think he can for a long time, certainly not on all debate, not on all discussion, and I don't even mean to suggest that he has. We still see, discussions of differences in policy toward North Korea in terms of economic reform. So, definitely scholars and analysts are still out there offering differing opinions. But the range is much more narrow, and the punishment much more severe, right, for activists and lawyers who try to push up against this kind of wall of against sort of political freedoms. I think as long as Xi Jinping delivers on economic growth, and he continues to build this sense of pride within the Chinese people over the emergence of China, the rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation, I think there probably is sort of a greater latitude for him to continue to narrow the space for political debate. Frankly speaking, you can look and see what is happening with American publishers, right, and others, going into China and being told, you must remove these 1,000 articles, right, that touch on, sensitive topics. And while most have pushed back, some have not. And so I think there's a challenge when you can begin to persuade, foreign media content providers, foreign companies, to begin to censor themselves. I think then Xi Jinping is really developing quite an effective political wall around the country.